Ma'am, we are live now.
Thank you, Abhishek. Welcome, everyone, to the second day of Assessing Architecture webinar being hosted by the School of Architecture, Sushant University. I'm very pleased today to welcome back our panelists. Today, Professor Manoj Mathur from School of Planning and Architecture, Professor Rajiv Mishra from JJ College of Engineering, and Professor Ravindra Basavra, a former Dean Sept. And joining us today from School of Architecture is also Amrita Madan. And for those of you in the attendees who are joining in either for the first time, she's a founding partner of Atelier Anonyme Design. She has an MPhil in Design Theories in Architecture and Urbanism from the University of Paris, and a CESP, which is a postgraduate certificate for specialization in landscape architecture, also from France. She's professor and design chair at School of Art and Architecture, Sushant University. And you know the other panelists already. So without much ado, and I apologize for the late start, we were having technical issues. But today's theme is on the methods, taking up from where we left off yesterday, in which we brainstormed about the problems and of assessing really a creative field like architecture. Now getting into the various methods that our panelists have sort of discovered or stumbled upon or devised, created, theorized from the last, in their teaching experience. And yeah, just to say that, this really started also with Mark Warner's sort of, his idea that how does one really assess creativity and how does one assess spark in a design. And some of this was briefly touched upon yesterday. And today we're actually going to try and, sort of try and find, if we can, some specifics of how this has been done by our various presenters. So without much ado, may I call on Professor Manoj Mathur to begin the talk on assessment and assessment methods, please, sir.
Right. So, in some ways, I will be repeating a lot of what I said yesterday because that's what I thought I was supposed to say today. But because of some confusion about whether I was in one session or two, that all of it came out yesterday anyway. But now that the chance is there, so let me elaborate a little bit on what I said yesterday. I really do not assess creativity at all. I have a problem with that idea, that notion itself, that there is creativity and that needs to be assessed. Because just sticking to the straight and narrow, in my opinion, that is not something for a teacher to be doing. Whether a person is creative is, after all, in the eyes of the beholder or in the eyes of the person who will be using the student's work later on. So a person you might think is not so creative may find a client who will say that this guy is wonderful. So who are you to say that this person is creative or not, or more creative or less creative? So personally, I do not assess creativity at all. So in a way that kind of completely eases Mark's pain that, how do you assess creativity? You don't. So that's the end of it. Now, so then what do? I actually, sounds very mundane, but actually I just look at competence. And I think my remit is only that at the end of the interaction or the course, as you might say, the person should gain the competency, should gain the abilities which one is trying to foster. Uh, so, and for that, there are many, let's say, stages. There are many milestones. There are many stepping stones, uh, and yeah, some of them take three at a time. Some of them take a long time, just over one, and then all of them. I find that in the last week of the semester, when you are really all keyed up about, oh my God, nothing is happening. Uh, you know, magically they all learn everything. I don't know where they learn it from. So it cannot be that in the hostels and at their homes they have this great tap, which they just turn on, and the designs and the sheets they just flow out. All of it basically means that they have been learning it all the time. Where at the back of their mind, all these things are getting stored up. All these things are getting collected. They're getting registered, and if they are not actually displaying them, there could be many reasons. It could be that you don't turn them on. I mean, the teacher is not able to turn them on. That they don't think it's worthwhile, you know, giving it to this one. They may be talking amongst themselves also, and that's also great learning. They might be doing other things. So the idea of what you assess, to me, it is certainly not that you assess creativity. What you assess, first of all, the way I like to do it is to let the student set their own goals. So even if there is a very, very fixed design problem in which the most basic design problems are always the ones in which you have a site and you have a client and you have certain requirements and all of that is already done, and then you say, okay, now go ahead and design. The student, for me, is always the one who gets to decide what and how they will want to achieve the design. So yes, there is a requirement, there's a set of requirements, there's a set of space requirements. Then we can go into all kinds of detail about what are the space attributes, and how much of lux level of light is required, for which how much is the size of window required, if exactly this direction of the window is towards the northeast. Yes, all of those things are there, but for the student, I like to encourage them to do two things, and if they are able to do both of them, then for me 80% of the work is done. So what are these two things? The first thing I like them to do, and again it's very strange because people say that this is not the way, they have to do it graphically, but I like to get them to write in words whatever they intend to do. So yes, there is a lot of discussion, there is a lot of doodling and lots of googling. All of that happens, and then we reach a stage somewhere, I would say around the 25% mark of the semester, which would say, let's say about 4 weeks, while all the things are happening. At that time I said, hey, now let's stop. Now each of you please just sit down and put it down in words. Putting down in words is, you could say, well, some people can write better and some people can't. I don't even bother about that. I said, तुम्हें हिंदी में लिखना है, हिंदी में लिखो. Any language you want to write in, you write. Okay? And if you even have that a problem, no problem. Speak it out, record it, okay, and play it back to me. So I think that in some ways is very, very helpful in creating commitment. It's like purchase. It's like once they do that, it's like an agreement to buy. So that for me is very important. Whatever we want the students to do, I think the first important step is that the students should be wanting to buy it. They must be wanting to participate in it. They must be wanting to take it from you. If they are willing to take it from you, then only the next step happens. If they are unwilling to even take it from you, and it's only dependent upon the fact that you are teacher, they are student, they have to have marks, they have to pass the exam, or they have to, get the grades, it doesn't quite serve the purpose. So to reach that stage where they buy in to whatever is the task at hand, I like them to write down. I said, no, don't bother, that the idea is not coming, or you don't have to say that, I'm going to make a design like a flower, or, I take my concept from the butterflies, fluttering wings. All of these things, students from somewhere, they pick it up, I don't know. But I say, no, don't bother about all that. Just tell me, we talked about so many things. These are the things that should be there in the good design. Tell me what are the things that you think really matter to you, and just write them down. Then we will go forward. And then what I do is that I say, okay, you wrote all of these things down, which are wonderful. Now, can you just fish out all the things that you did in the past 4 weeks? So you had some little bits here and there, little scraps, something on a sketchbook, something on a butter paper. Can you see anything of what you are writing here in what you did? So I find that if I'm able to connect the written word of the student, or the word of the student, if not written, at least the spoken word of the student, spoken with commitment, that is, it's recorded. So that word of the student with their action, which they've already done. Most of the time I find that the problem is that students never know when they are onto a good thing. And I think that's the biggest pity. They sometimes do wonderful things, and they never realize what they have done. So I try to connect the word which they have expressed with the action which they have done. And I said, okay, now let's see if we can make sense between this and this. And then let's go forward. And going forward, I always like that, the student should pick up a few things, not all the things. I say that, no, you have written down 16 different things, and they're so disparate. I mean, are you joking that you will do this also and that also? So I say, no matter, even if you are joking, let's say what all things we can pick up first. Now let's try and see if just by taking 4 of them, we can make sense of something. I like that the student give me just one piece of graphic, and I will not call it a drawing. I'm saying it may be a sketch, maybe a diagram, it may be a drawing, of course. Everybody knows that the first thing you do is you just draw up some bubbles on the site, and you call it zoning plan or something like that. So these are the things which they come up to. I mean, now I'm talking because I'm mostly, for the last 10 years, I'm only doing 4th year and thesis. So these are the things which they have kind of come through the conditioning of the first 3 years, that this is the process of design. So I say, no, it doesn't matter. Even if you're just doing this one, the starting thing, whatever you're thinking of, with colored felt pens and, nice arrows. And somehow when the air passes through the site, it always goes in a zigzag. I don't know, all these things, they think they really work. And sometimes, of course, that out of the zigzag, the air branches off and completely takes a U-turn. All those things also happen in that diagram. So I say, all right, this is good enough for me, but can you do this to the greatest detail possible? So I just say, just make me one good piece of graphic. Just make me one good drawing. You want to make a site plan? Okay, just make me one good site plan and put down as much as you can in it. What you cannot put down at that scale, no problem. Give me an annotation, write me a little note. write me a little blurb somewhere that in this place we will do this. So that's when I really feel that this student has actually got onto it. So I think the getting onto it, the climbing onto the bandwagon is all that I think is my work. To get this one to do a great design, I don't think that is what is something which the school should be worried about. And always I find that almost everybody can do a great design. They sometimes surprise you completely. I've had people who who would get laughed at every time in the design studio, in the architectural design studio, have gone on to do transport planning, and now are designing wonderful bridges and flyovers, which are a delight to look at. You can actually see that this guy was an architect before he became a town planner, transport planner. So where did it come from? It only came from here. All I'm saying is, why expect it to exfoliate here? Why expect it to bloom here? It can bloom at the time when the student wants to. All you have to do is just put in all the ingredients in place. That's all. That's what I have to say.
If I may ask, because I understand the process by which I think that you develop this process with your students individually, almost, it seems like a contract.
Yes.
And, right. So there is agreement about the plan, there's agreement about what is expected, and then there is an assessment also, because coming back to that point of assessment, how then, I'm still not very clear how assessment actually takes place in this system.
Assessment takes place exactly in the same way. Assessment takes place by bringing out the commitment. It's completely transactional. It is like in a shop. It's like one side the seller is sitting, one side the buyer is sitting. Okay, and he said, okay, what were the specs? You said this washing machine is to have. Okay, show me that brochure. So the brochure is taken out. Okay, and then comes the washing machine, and we go. Okay, so how does this come in here? Okay, sometimes it comes in very well, so it needs no explanation. So the student doesn't have to say anything, and sometimes it requires a little bit of poking. And sometimes there is actually a mistake. Oh, okay, sorry, I did not mean this. I should have done this. That's when when you point it out to the commitment, then sometimes the mistake comes about, because even though you may have written it yourself, but reading is such a pain. So even if the student has written their own list of desirables, never are they going to read it back again to themselves unless you kind of take them through the motions. Along with them, you also read. Only then they said, oh, yes, I did write that. Okay? So I make a lot of enemies with my let's say kind of thinking, and certainly it sometimes comes out very badly in juries when I go elsewhere. I always say that if there is 100% mark for a subject, okay, the teacher should be able to put down very categorically what is it that the student must do to get that 100% mark. And I think I somehow recall, rather, we have had this discussion before.
In our dissertation jury, yes, absolutely, okay. We have.
Right. So that's my point. If you are able to put down that the student must do all of this, however long that list might be, to get that 100% mark, I say that if this list has got 78 items, have you been able to convey to the student all these 78 items? And did you find the student falling short in any of them, yes, then you can cut marks. But first, if you haven't been able to write it, number one, and secondly, if you haven't been able to actually convey all of this in your class, then why are you going to cut the marks for the student? So if there is, now let me bring in that golden word. If there is a rubric, okay, stick to it. And I have seen lots of rubrics, which kind of, if you do this much, then the marks will be between 90 and 70. I say, why? Why should the rubric be not a little more elaborate? That if you do this, marks are 100. And if you do this, then the marks are 77.5. So if there is a rubric, if you have been able to do all of those things, all the tasks associated with what the student has to do to achieve the 100, if all those tasks were done, then the assessment also has to be, precise.
I'm wondering,
So
but maybe we can take this up. I have some follow-up questions for this. What happens to parity? What happens to these 78 points are made by between the student and faculty, or is that done again by faculty? But we'll come to this, I think, in our follow-up sort of discussion, and maybe some other people might address it too. How far we can really push this collaborative process between faculty and student all the way, or stop at some point. Professor Mishra, if I may ask you now to share with us assessment systems that you have found to be particularly useful, or in dealing with the loopholes that assessment generally tends to demand of us, and that we find falling short in design especially, but also perhaps other subjects.
Can you hear me? Are you able to
Yes.
hear me?
Yes,
Thank you.
I can.
See, yesterday I was not able to continue, but I would like to add 2 sentences before I come to design assessment. One is that, when in 1913 the college started, that was the beginning of the Bauhaus movement. Architecture, design, art was playing a major role. And World War One just finished, yeah, until 1918. And therefore there was something like a mass production. So in JJ School of Architecture, okay, which was Department of an Art School, the core competency was related to design, okay, and therefore we take design evaluation very seriously because we have 3 phases. One is design thinking, second is design development, third is design process, and fourth is design delivery. Okay, so these are the stages that we tell students that while you are going to work, this is what we are going to expect you to define, which I think Professor Mathur has told the students to write. We also have a growth in design learning in our college where we say first year basic design, second year interior design, third year architecture design, and fourth year urban design will be our forceful areas of design. This is where we will concentrate more. And the final year, we will end up with design dissertation, where you'll come up with amalgamation of all your learning in construction services, site development, and building bylaws. So we have been looking at teaching pedagogy in terms of design, where we tell students that design is their core competency. Every other subject is an allied subject that will help you become a better designer. Okay, so we take architecture and history as a design subject where we teach them that it is not only looking at a structure but looking at the construction technology of a Brunelleschi dome in Romanesque that becomes a double dome in St. Peter's, that becomes a triple dome at St. Paul. So it is dome technology in design. So for us, design is a subject which is an extension of a building construction subject, which is an extension of a architectural history subject. And what is it that you do in terms of design to help your societies humanities subject. Yeah? So we basically try to tell design to be a core subject in which we have to attain competency. Now, what is it that we do when it comes to assessment of design? I think the first phase is design thinking. We think about what is it that we want to do and what direction do we take for designing anything, for any topic or any subject. So design thinking takes 1 week. What is it that you wish to do, and how would you take your design thinking direction? Which we do not oppose. We let the students flower onto themselves. Okay, this is the way you would like to think. Go ahead, think like this. The second stage comes to design development. We see, okay, how has he converted the thought processes through sketches and through his ideas, through illustrations, and developed his design thinking process on paper. We would basically learn to see through him by his filmmaking technique, by his photography technique, by his sketching technique, okay, at a site. So design development at a site. So whether he has given more importance to the contours of the site, whether he has taken importance of the site overlooking something, whether he has basically understood the relevance of site to design development. Okay, so that would be the second stage of our assessment of design development. The third stage comes to how will you basically be able to convert this design development to your final stage of design, whatever it might be. So we basically try to guide a student to refine his design thinking, design development, so that he ends up coming up with some kind of a delivery in terms of design drawings. Right? Now, it may be an architectural solution for anything. It may be a situation which he thinks is best, and therefore he or she is asked to explain why do you think you could have not done better. So we basically do not do marking. We basically grade students into A, B, and C, where we basically give C to a person who has managed to do things because of the basic requirements and has arrived at a place where an architectural solution has been attained according to you. B is a design solution where he has been able to refer to his design thinking and design development in such a way that his design solution is related to it. He did not go astray. He did not spring a surprise at the end of the last week and showed us a design project, but this is what I think I have done. Because it has to be related. And A is something that we tell that, you have done better than B, where you have not only thought, but you have always tried to develop a design and brought in new values of technology, new values of culture, new values of thinking, which must have gone otherwise unattended to by other students. So this is the kind of design assessment we want the teachers to know who are doing design assessment. And it is basically shared values in a class. In a studio, if you have four kinds of teachers evaluating design subject in four different ways, okay, it is absolutely welcome. But you should ultimately have some shared value of what is good design and what is A, B, and C great design. So what we do is we basically do an open jury of these students' work. Okay, as per we have four groups in a class, and each teacher picks up the best works of the students, and then we talk about it. Why this is this? Why this student has not been able to achieve? Maybe next project he will be able to achieve it. He was not able to do it, and then we do not let students feel that this is their failure. I think this is what is very important. You are not able to do certain things which you could have thought about. And therefore, next time when you do a design project, take care to see that you do not miss out these. I think students, when are encouraged, take this up and remember it well so that when they do a next design project, they actually tell this in the next class. See, last time I was not being able to do it, but this time I'm going to do it. We also have a very unusual issue in our college. Now we have a group of slow learners and fast learners. Okay, and we sometimes have a difficult situation to deal with slow learners. We do not deny that they are not able to think fast, but then if you put them with people who can think fast and let them know that if you work together on a design project, maybe it will help. But we will do your evaluation separately. You can work together in a group, but then we will evaluate you separately for your responses to design in a design studio. And it has helped us because I think slow learners then feel that they want to do better than the fast learners. And sometimes we find that when it comes to design development and design delivery, the design thought is wonderful, but design development is where the situation changes. So we as teachers learn a lot while teaching design as a subject. It is actually a new thinking for us also, and we end up uh, thinking about solutions which we would have not thought. I think the students like it. This is what I feel. The students like it when teachers show that they are also learning with them how to design a better solution. And then they perform, and this helps assessment. And then if the student is also led to a situation where they learn to assess each other, I think it works. And nobody then crips about why I got B grade and why he got A grade. I think I'm not trying to compare their performance. I'm just trying to say what is it that they missed out and what is it that he remembered or she remembered. And therefore, the student rightly deserves to get what he or she deserves to get. So these are what I feel about the design assessment thought processes that we follow. And every student has this competitive feeling that I would like to be able to design better. So I think this feeling is very important. It doesn't matter what they get, but what they learn out of it is wonderful. So we have a design conclusion session at the end of a design class and actually share with the teachers how the design project went about, how the design thinking went about, and how the design delivery happened. And this wow factor, this is something which I wanted to add. I agree with Manoj Mathur. It is up to you. What is your wow factor? As long as you are able to create an emotional impact in the mind of an observer when it comes to building anything on paper, I think you have arrived. I think you have done well. Then it doesn't matter whether you've done B grade or A grade. I think you have been able to do well. And that the student understands. So we don't mark them, we grade them. And that is how we do design assessment. This is what I wanted to share at our college. We take care to see that in our group assessment, two of them are academicians and two of them are practicing architects. It's easy in a situation like city of Bombay where practicing architects are available to give their time, and we basically um, charm them to take interest because they feel they would also end up learning something. I think this is very important. Practicing architects also, when they come to school of architecture and when they talk to students, have a desire to learn and they want to learn, and this is what helps. And their time and interest in design process of evaluation makes students happy. So we have an architect called Shakti Parmar who is who's interested, even at the age of 75, to learn from students. And I think that makes students think beyond the thought process. They don't
So,
restrict
Professor
themselves.
Mishra, if I may, so we've talked about the design process that you follow in your studios, and that what I'm getting from both you and Professor Mathur is that largely there's this understanding. That's how assessment is carried out, as this understanding between students and faculty, and that there is still this. Um, it's a looser system. It's flexible. It's catering to a broader set of understanding of, whether you've reached a certain competence, as Professor Mathur mentioned yesterday as well, and also has reiterated today, that their student has learned something, has moved forward from where he was at the beginning of the semester, and that is given some marks. We're not getting into, so this is qualitative, right? I mean, this is all qualitative assessment so far, what I'm hearing from both of you. And again, maybe we can come back to this point. Actually have to give that grade. Is it the A? Is it the A minus? Is it the B? Is there how does that happen? But we can get to that, in terms of, because really it ends up becoming a system of not just words, it becomes numbers. That conversion happens at some stage of this assessment process, however late in the day or however it may be. So I'm also interested in really just tapping into that little section from where this qualitative becomes quantitative, and how. Actually, the how part is what's really important. Professor Vasavra, may I call on you, please, next to share your assessment methods, please.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
I hope you can listen to me.
Yes, sir.
Am I
Yes, we
audible?
can. Yes, you are, sir.
Yes, sir.
Well, listening to first two presentations, I think it is almost similar everywhere, because the whole issue of assessment is something, which is more or less similar. And what you look at and what you sort of try to somehow find out and do is also similar in our system, which will be somehow ending up with the same kind of educational systems. So I don't see much difference in what was even happening at the SEPT. I must tell you that I am out of SEPT since '98. So I don't know very precisely what is happening there now. But and I believe there is a huge amount of change which has taken place in all the systems and procedures happening at SEPT, including the credit system, which was earlier very different. So I will not be able to really add to, that aspect, because I'm not conversant, and I'm not very sure whether, my presentation of something, which was quite old, will meet with your expectations, because I think you're talking to, two panelists, who are currently extremely involved in the system. So from that point of view, I don't know how far what I say would be useful, because you're trying to compare two or three institutions and the approach to assessment, which is really tried out there. So first and foremost, I would like to clarify whether what I present would be relevant in the light of these two other presentations. Would that be relevant?
I think
Yes.
I think
Radha.
I think it should be.
It should be. If you can,
Yeah,
it doesn't
I'd like
matter
to
the assessment.
that.
If that's the most if that's the assessment, that you are most satisfied with, it doesn't matter how old it was, how many years ago it was done. I think it's okay. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So, because I have a feeling that you actually sort of understand the different systems, which are in practice in current scenario. So if that is something, which would be of your interest, I would certainly talk about it as to how I used to go about it. And talking of that, you see, yesterday I was talking about my involvement at two levels, three levels rather, at the School of Architecture. And what becomes very crucial here when we compare, the methods in the studio situation, what I used to do at the level of, pre-final level. And as I was mentioning, the entire, problem of conducting a studio becomes very important. And how you introduce a particular studio and how the program that you really build up becomes some kind of a basis for everybody to sort of concur to and work around. So that way, the role of the faculty becomes very crucial. So I used to take a sort of great care in preparing a particular program, which actually introduces the project. It also introduces the context of the project, and it also introduces the expectations out of the learning, that one would sort of outline, and one would also, in a sense, leave it open to the students, to sort of interpret and find their own ways into this. And then it would also, in a way, include the various, stages of work, and because each stage is something, where internal assessment takes place. So it would introduce the stages of the work, the expected progress at each stage of the work, and then how one really, sort of makes an overall progress within the studio situation for over 16 weeks, or, to be precise, 12 weeks of the continuous work. And at the end, I used to prepare for my own understanding and to become really objective about this. I used to sort of prepare a complete, report card for each of the students, where, I would sort of put my own observations of how every individual has really sort of, conducted his work throughout the studio. And it would talk about, the regularity. It would talk about to the kind of program given. It would talk about the kind of nuances, that the student really tries to pick up. And then on the other hand, it would also talk about the, overall, participation in terms of students' backup, for preparing himself for the studio. And then about the, the progress, you see, in terms of his own work, and then about, his conceptual ideas, that he would really develop. So, the studio stages were also in a divided, depending on this kind of requirements of how one goes about thinking. And then, it would really, lay emphasis on the skills, that one really applies to in terms of drawings, in terms of models, and in terms of, some kind of background studies that one really puts in. So all these were somehow components of the assessment, and there were sort of varying degree of, weightage is given to all this. And I would really come up with this kind of a report wherein, including the regularity, everything would be sort of, assessed. So this is the way, I would sort of go about doing this. So, the idea is to somehow minimize the chances of any kind of, sudden spurt in work or sudden absences, during the semester. And the thrust would be on a kind of continuous work within the studio that one needs to really carry out in order to, sort of satisfactorily finish the work. So this is some kind of a system I would really follow, for assessment within the studio. So uh, this is purely based on the work produced. And as Professor Madhu was mentioning, this is something, which would become the basis, you see. And one would, yes, one can really, when one is grading or when one is really assessing something, there is always an element of competitive or comparative sort of decisions, when it comes to the studio, sort of participation. But, issues like creative imagination and things like that, you see, one would avoid sort of making any judgment on that, you see, because eventually everyone tries to do, depending on their abilities, the best use of their own faculties. So this is something, which is never included as part of the judgment. And the other thing was also this, that since the entire process was assessed periodically, you know, it was a kind of a very gradual process of assessment for any student. And it was never, just the final presentation, which carried the total weightage. And many times, you see, we also insisted that final presentation was something, which was also many times considered as the final output, but because the process was something, which was always assessed and which was always emphasized as a part of design rather than the final result, there was also a kind of margin of of the margin was reduced, of any kind of instant judgment at the end. So this is something, which would be our approach, you see. So we used to also emphasize that it is the process through which a student goes through during the 12-week period, which is very important under the instructions of the faculty, rather than just looking at the final presentation. So there were these issues, you see, which were also coming up in School of Architecture, where many times the final submissions, were becoming some kind of an aged effort. You see, there was a kind of student fraternity who was always willing to sort of chip in, to somehow help the juniors or help the seniors, because many times final submissions really carried a tremendous and pressure on the students. But to reduce that kind of element, you see, of tension, I used to always follow and give much more emphasis on the entire process of the studio when it came to assessment, rather than just looking at the final presentation. So this is roughly the way, I used to sort of conduct. And, it worked fairly well. So, it was also, in a sense, a kind of general attitude in the School of Architecture to somehow, look at the whole studio performance this way, because I think it takes away a lot of such last minute tensions. So this is something, which I would say at this moment, and open for discussion, you see, later on.
Thank you, Professor Vasavra, for sharing that. I'll now very quickly move on to Amrita Madan, who has a presentation of the assessment methods that we follow at Sushant's School of Art and Architecture. Amrita, I ask you to.
Yeah. Hi everyone. Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yes.
So I'll go into the presentation directly, and then we'll.
Yeah, we can, I think, have a discussion around that and other questions which may arise. Open it up. Yeah, we can see this.
Oops. Yeah. Is that good?
Yes, it is.
I hope you can see the screen. Yeah. Okay, great.
Yeah.
So hi everyone. I'm going to present what we at Sushant have been trying to develop in a very broad sense as a system of maybe it's not a system of assessment purely. I mean, and I think everybody's been talking about it, that the assessment is not de-linked to the method of delivery and the process inside the studios. So before I move into what, how we actually do the assessment, like everyone else over here, let me set a bit of a background as to what this means for us, value-based assessment system. So this has really been our starting point to reassess what kind of projects, what kind of work, what kind of intent do we need to bring to the educational apparatus, and to really talk about what is it that we want our students to learn. So do we want our students to learn about typology-based projects, or do we want them to learn something different? So here is this, this is ecological systems theory that we based our whole, learning process on. And according, extrapolating from this theory, which is about how a person gets impacted and goes through their various stages of learning in life, or development in life rather, we've kind of made the system, tried to see what it means in an architectural studio format, and now we are trying to experiment, literally, these are experiments, with this in terms of everything else that surrounds the design studio, maybe, or everything else that is, in the whole apparatus. So here, what we are trying to focus on is more on the impact of projects rather than typology. So our first starting point of this system is that who are we impacting? How are we impacting them? What is the nature of that impact? So we start with impacting from a very personal, local scale all the way till larger scales of society, talking about projects that might implicate, say, larger and sections of the society, including if you talk about gendered spaces, then those are projects that implicate every aspect of the society in some sense. So they kind of go into this idea of the macro system. So we've kind of tried to do this like an onion layer, which we are actually not peeling off but adding on to as we move ahead over the years. So from here, it sort of give us some idea about how we want our studios to progress. And I'm not making a case for any particular studio or any particular method. You will see that within what I'm going to show, that the methods, the processes are different, but they all fall within a sort of an attempt to kind of create a very connected learning across from the first. So that was the aim. So as you can see, converting those systems impacts to kind of projects. So we started talking about which is the kind of project that would work, what are the intents that would work, when we talk about, from intimate spaces to groups in publics to multiple community, projects. So it kind of became a sort of a blueprint for us to proceed with what is it that we want to do. And while we did that, we also developed a very intensive value system, which is also a very open-ended value system, in which we are saying that, it's continuously open to for us to interpret. And so this, we kind of divided the whole learning process into, what is it, like I said, what is it that we want our graduates to know? Based on that, we said, okay, so there are certain sets of values that we want them to inculcate, and there are certain ways in which we want those values to be delivered to them. So, so we broadly divided these into these 4 disciplinary values sets, and within that, all of these, so there, as of now, there are 12 of these values, what we are trying to do is kind of give a whole map of across the years. Today I'll be, maybe taking up one value. I think I'm going to take up the meaning of context as a value, which is a part of our integral value set right here, and sort of, charted what it means over 4 years and 4 semesters only, but to just give an idea of how each year can interpret this in a different way, and what does it mean for the evaluation or the assessment system. So taking this value set, the meaning of context, so what we did was we charted this across these 4 years, and we said, okay, what does context mean at different levels? What are we trying to achieve? What are we trying to impart? What are we trying to for our students to engage with literally? And again, remember that whole person to macro system construct. Within that, this sort of cross-connected learning that we were talking about. So every time there are different aspects of the context that come into play. Context is not a singular entity. Obviously, we all engage with it in different ways in different times. So we do start talking about context in a very interpersonal, images way, all the way to talking about it as a social construct. What does that mean? What does context mean as a historical construct? What does it mean when we purely talk about it in a physical entity, like concepts of site and images of where our project is operating. So this whole chart was sort of laid out for all of us to kind of start understanding where we were going to be placed. And what this did for us was that it told us where the kind of action that I need, or the kind of projects, or the kind of of tools and methods that I needed to place inside each studio, and how that was going to actually be tied up across the eventual learning of the student. So how I had to actually support what was just behind me and what was just going to come after me, and I was not going to act in an individual, sort of separated or an island. So this sort of related to a certain understanding of the. Now I'll go into the rubric. So how does this play out? What does it mean for us in terms of the rubrics? I'm going to skip over a lot of things. So I'm talking about the rubrics of the second semester over here, year 1, second semester. So here the idea is the two-way relationship of context. So now, as far as we are concerned, the value system itself on its own, one value does not give us a learning outcome. So the value is embedded in various aspects of the learning outcomes, and you will see that all the rubrics are all derived very differently, focus on very different things, and actually have a very different grading system within that. And so there's that flexibility.
Amrita, we seem to have lost your audio.
Or learning outcome number 6. Can you hear me? Is there?
Yeah, Amrita, now we can. Yeah, you're back. Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Okay, I don't know how much you got missed, but I was just making a point
just briefly,
here. Yeah, here the context is the idea of the context is embedded in maybe 3 or 4 of these learning outcomes. So the learning outcomes are related to all the values, but given just this value, so we say learning outcome 4, learning outcome 5, learning outcome 6, all of them have, even 7 has some idea of context embedded in it. So this was one of the methods, and in the semester 2, I don't know how much of this is visible in terms of the screen size, but
could you zoom in a little bit, perhaps, to some, or not?
It's I'm a little whatever on the screen because it might just shut off because of.
Okay, all right. Sure.
So I'll just make a point in over here. So context over here at this point, this is year 2, semester 4. Which is ways of deriving from the past, history, memory, vernacular. So various aspects of context. So here learning outcome 2 is the ability to deal with complex site conditions in climate, culture, context, correlating contextual issues such as land and landforms with the elements of built space. So this sort of learning outcome that gets actually, it's a broad idea. What we do is we kind of back it up with a secondary, detailed understanding, which says, the ability to link settlement study to intended outcomes of the studio, and the ability to evidence critical response to context, unique observations, cross-connected learning, and analytical ability. So here what I'm trying to do is that I'm not correlating context to just one thing, but I'm correlating it to analytical ability, contextual cross-connected learning, to observations, to many other aspects of the design process. So what happens through such a rubric for us is that the students understand that none of these things can happen, just in a very, random sort of way at the end of the semester, maybe, or that they are not, they are not isolated entities, that they are all cross-connected, and that you cannot talk about one without having to talk about the other. So this sort of rubric, and this is given to the students. So what it does is, so it's extremely subjective still, but what it does is it tells them that they need to link it to the intended output of the studio. They need to talk about a critical response. So the students are, it's not prescriptive in that sense, but it is also, it's sort of directive, that they know what they need to engage with and what they need to bring into the equation. So moving on to the year 3, so again the same context is now looked at as an evolving construct. So context is ever changing, ephemeral. It is the effect of weather, it's unpredictable, it's temporary, and these are the 4 learning outcomes that it sort of gets embedded in. It talks about intangible parameters, it talks about even the tangible parameters, it talks about rules and regulations, bylaws, which are a part of our contextual understanding of what we are building, environmental and economic aspects come into play in that, and also the material systems. So one entity can move into many such different types, and that's what we are striving for. And then this becomes the main assessment rubric of that 3rd year, which says, and here is the point that we I want to highlight for contextual learning over here, is that the degree to which the prototype constructs and iterative derivatives justify the ecological argument. So here again, the context appears in a different way as an ecological argument, and how it successfully plugs into the design construct formulated. So again, the whole idea is that it's a web. It's not isolated. It's cross-connected. Quickly moving to 4th year. Now we are talking about urban context. We are talking political, economic, ecological, global, and we sort of that idea sometimes gets implicated inside the primary brief, the brief of the studio, which says that in this case,
Amrita, your audio, oops, sorry. Yeah, audio was again off for a bit.
Okay. So I don't know, there's a connection, poor connection over here. I'll just, quickly say this if it wasn't heard, that the urban context, in this case, the ecological and the global context were the 2 things that were bringing this question about, which was about how much land does a man need, which was the premise of this 4th year studio. And from there, which we led to the idea of how do we assess them. So we do tend to assess them to understand the local, national, public, local project, housing scenarios. We talk about ecological responses. Again, the context idea is now embedded in different ways in a very simple rubric, which is easy to understand as well. And so going to the primary discussion that I wanted to bring to the table here was that we talked about this a little bit yesterday. We talked about how assessment is actually, what is the relationship between delivery and assessment, and the primary discussion over here is that we cannot fix assessment without changing the delivery. If we think that assessment needs to be in a particular way, we have to go back and we have to change the whole delivery process. I think all of my colleagues have talked about it over here today. And along with that is very important is that the awareness of the student of what is expected, and a format like what we are trying to follow, which gives the overall purview to the student. They don't start with an opacity of what is expected of them, but they can chart the processes differently, as we have again talked about. Again, assessment is not of a deliverable. It is, we are not, again, I think all of us are agreeing on that. We are not assessing good design, a well-drawn plan, a something that is good, bad. We are assessing whether something has come into play the way it, not the way, but did those considerations, did they come about, and what kind of process did they lead to? So we are talking more in terms of critical thinking, and that critical thinking itself is a very, very subjective criteria, and no matter which subject it is, which field it is, critical thinking is subjective. To assess critical thinking is going to be a subjective entity. It's not going to be objective. Before we do any of that, or even while we are doing any of that, it's important that we map our students, which again, even Professor Vasavada has talked about it. So we are mapping our students, we are mapping them through where they have started from and what processes they have gone through and what's the end. And I'm going to skip this a bit because I think, again, just the point that I want to make space for the subjective within the objective. It is within the learning objective, and that's what we are all striving to do. And as far as, what do we assess them overall on, I think we try and understand what kind of critical thinking do they bring to the table, what have we been able to implicate, how have we been able to make them into inquirers, communicators, listeners, determine people who can determine importance and relevance of arguments and ideas, how much we've been able to give them the tools to be self-directed, self-driven, self-reflective, self-motivated. This is what we as pedagogues sort of need to focus on. And good designers are essentially critical thinkers. So if we can focus on these rather than the outcome, we are going to get there, hopefully. Bruce Mau's manifesto is sort of the backbone that for me personally is something that I would like my students to engage with, and I would like to make the whole, setup, the whole context of how to make, abstract and conceptual and subjective learning possible for everyone. So I think do more, not less is one of the things that we need to do with ourselves and our students. Do more, not less. Critique is something that we do really have to reflect on further, how it can be optimistic and critical and not cynical. I think I'll end here with this point, that we are going to be making the thinkers of tomorrow. So how we set the agenda today is going to be important for us to change, actually, or even positively implicate the architectural, the discipline for tomorrow. And that's the agenda of assessment more than anything else. Thank you.
Thank you, Amrita. And this is a process that at Sushant, I know we're all familiar with, but we are hoping that it also sort of gave something to the others. And thanks for the presentation, Amrita. I'd like to actually invite, before, instead of going on, Mark Warner, if I may. Mark, could you unmute yourself? Since it's his brainchild, this webinar.
Can you hear me?
Hi, Mark. Yes.
Well, not actually my brainchild. This is Vibhuti. I just started a conversation and.
Right.
Sorry to interrupt.
I was wondering if you could actually start.
I said sorry to interrupt, but the value system is also Mark's brainchild.
Well, okay, if you insist.
So, Mark, I'd like to ask you to actually respond, if you could, to the the speakers, either individually or as a collective, and whether are there any questions that you first of all might have, or anything that you would actually like to add to what has been discussed so far?
Well, we all have diverse views, and that's great. And we each have their own culture by which we work. I'm sure JJ school, I'm sure, has its own culture, and SEPT has its distinctly a different culture. And when I was in Baroda, where I studied in Baroda at MS University, that had its own culture as well. And I've taught in several schools in Delhi, so I'm well aware that there's a particular culture in each college. So, and each goes about it. But what's been driving me is I've been teaching for many years, and I'm always driven to be more precise in my delivery as a teacher and in my assessment, and therefore I got into this thing about values, and so Amrita and I have been working on this the last 3 years now, and frankly, Amrita's done most of the hard work. I've been the lazy guy who sort of, comes up with an odd statement here and there. But so anyway, and all this putting all of these documents put together are really Amrita's doing, really. The thing is, we want, there's a question of how we deliver to the students, and there's a question of how students respond. And my main concern has been, how do we frame our rubrics in such a way that it makes it easier for us to teach and deliver and make more sense, and it makes it easier for the students to learn or to make sense of what we are saying. And we've got this wonderful document developing at Sushant, and that document also does a third thing, which to me is a very important point, is that it is a basis on which we have our discussions. So our discussions are more focused, are coordinated, and so these set of values which defines, we're trying to also define what kind of a student comes out of our school. What is a Sushant graduate? I mean, what does he or she stand for? What skills do they have? What are their values? And so these are the broad questions from which we started off, actually, and came down to to the kind of discussions which we are having presently. And this is a kind of conversation we would like to have across schools. I mean, we don't want it to be just that. We would like to, present our points of view and hear yours. And I think architectural education in India is now maturing into, I think, one of the best systems. We have such diversity. We have such cultural diversities, the ways of thinking, and I think the more we collaborate, the better off we are. It is, after all, the age of collaboration that we are living in. So I think I really would like to see it cross the borders of our own institutions and be able to talk and converse about these issues. So that's my overall overarching thinking about the things we are discussing nowadays. Yeah, so I think I've said my bit. I
think what you've said and what many of the panelists, I mean, there's this forward, backward way, right? Like assessment and process, and where you're trying, what is the, who is the architect that we're trying to assess, what are we trying to make out of this assessment, where are we pushing this agenda, and then going back to what our learning or our objectives were, etc.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, I think this is something that we're sort of going back and forth with in whatever processes, in the different approaches that all the schools have outlined. That there is this, So, who's the Sushant graduate? Yesterday, I think Professor Mathur also mentioned something, I mean, perhaps inadvertently, about, who's the SPA graduate? You've spoken about the Sushant graduate. And he's not here today, so I'm just sort of trying to bring in some bits from yesterday. Someone who can go out into the field and just be put to work straight away is how he put it, like just successfully like that.
That it is, but I would digress on that. That's one way of. No, I'm not disagreeing with him. I mean, I have enormous respect for Manoj, and he's the only person I acknowledge who's better than me in drawing. Anyway, so
I'll let him know that.
Oh, he knows.
So I think there was another point that Manoj also brought up today, and I think that's something that we talk about very often over here as well. And again, thanks to Mark, is when is a student and how is a student ready to receive? That whole receive the things that you're teaching them, or like what he said, get on to the bandwagon, get on to the train of architectural thinking. That's something that I think we are all also thinking about. We are talking about how it's then not a process of assessment anymore. If the point is to success, to bring them on, once they are on, then you don't need to assess them. Then they're good to go.
Yeah, for all of us, what is the end result of an education? Finally, the student must leave our universities with a sense of with a healthy self-confidence. Not overconfident or underconfident, but a healthy self-confidence. And if you have that, you've got everything. If you have that sort of self-confidence that you can handle anything that comes your way, which is at your level of your seniority or juniority, whatever it is. If you have that confidence, you have everything. If you don't have that confidence, you really don't have very much. So it's really, at the end, my question always in mind is, are my students going out with that self-confidence? That's what it is. I think all our schools do it in their own kind of way, but the other question I'm also trying to bring up right now is, how future ready are we? I mean, life is moving ahead, technology is advancing, society is changing. How are we preparing ourselves for this? So I'm not, where I was digressing with Manoj was that he and were talking about, students being put in to be able to function in office as soon as they graduate. But that is not really, that has never been my aim, actually. My aim has always been that my graduate, as to what kind of architects they would be when they're in their 30s, or when they are reaching senior positions, or they're starting their own practices. That is where my aim is. What kind of an architect will they be? Have I prepared them in their graduate process sufficiently that they are, innovative, humanistic architects when they start off their own practices, or they reach levels of greater responsibilities. That's, I think, where I think our education should be really heading towards it.
One stage is the graduate, and then the architect, the professional in life.
Yeah. So I don't think we should really prepare students to, just join the workforce. Well, that is important, of course.
I'm sorry, Professor Mathur isn't here. I just brought that up because there was this sort of parallel going on. I wouldn't I'm sure he meant more than that. I don't know.
Yeah, oh, I know, yeah, but no, but that point was brought up, and I mean, Manoj has his own ways of explaining things.
Can I say something?
Yes,
Please.
Absolutely.
Recently, over last 2-3 years, we have started designing the design brief with the students before we give them the design project. We basically, after showing them the site, tell them our intention that we want this project to be designed and what is it that they would like to bring in as value addition to this project when it comes to design brief. And we have had our share of success. When you involve the student in making the design brief, the seriousness of doing a design project increases multifold. And what I think Amrita presented, how she handles fourth year, how she handles third year, well done. I think this is very nice. If you just let the student know where he is heading, I think the student really, who are very lean, mean, and hungry and want to become architects of the sort that they want to do, I think they just want to become better and better. So I think if you involve the student in making your design brief, the level of involvement increases. This is what I wanted to say to Mark. Yeah.
That's very interesting. I would love to, do something similar of getting the students involved in making the brief.
It helps. It helps.
Yeah, owning the problem is everything, I think, in many ways. Yeah.
Yeah, we have a few questions. Sorry, Amrita, did you want to respond?
Amrita,
sorry, I was just saying that I see Manoj has joined back. So if you want to bring him back into the earlier argument, it would be nice to hear his views on it.
Oh, Manoj, I digressed about something you had said. So that's.
I
Manoj,
can't
can
see him actually. I have my chat open actually for the questions.
Is Manoj there?
Yeah, I'm there.
Yeah. Okay, I was just saying, I had said that, what I had digressed about what you had said was about students being prepared to join an office or being able to function as soon as they leave in whatever situation there was. And I was saying that my time was a little more different, that I was aiming more at what my students would be when they were in their 30s or 40s or something like that, when they reach senior positions or they start their own practices. And, that's where I aim at, to inculcate what kind of values they will have, what kind of outlooks to the world or the universe that they will have, which is, I think, part of our education is to look far ahead and see what our students are going to become. I mean, what is our vision of the future? Are we future ready? Is, I think, the phrase I also used. So that's where I just. But I must also tell you, I also told them I acknowledge you as the only person who's better than me in drawing. Manoj and I worked together at one time in one office. That's where it comes from.
So, Professor Mathur, I just reminded everyone about what you had said yesterday. That very succinctly, you had said that this is at SPA we are looking to make architects who can go out and be put to work. And of course, I know that this was probably a sort of the briefest possible way of describing the SPA graduate. But I was wondering if since it started with that and you were not here, I was wondering if you want to add to that, and that's what Mark's responding to now.
Yeah, right. So I quite appreciate Mark where he stands. I stand there too. I would only say that the difference, and I think part of it has to do with the fact that uh, when you get to the other side of the table, and I mean the administrator's table. Okay, so when you do a little bit of that, when you do a small stint on the administration side, then a lot of your views, they kind of uh, they change. Let me just say, they change, and because not only are you looking at it from the point of view of what you and your students, what you do with your students, how you treat them, how you look at them, but you also kind of are responsible for a whole lot of other teachers. Some of them may be younger and they might be looking to find a way which certainly there's no other way to find your way of teaching except by teaching more and more and learning as you go along. And then there are also people who are older who already have done it in a certain way, and sometimes they are not nimble enough to change when things change in the curriculum, or some new ideas need to be uh, floated. So looking at it from that perspective, this is what now I have come to. I would probably very vociferously argue on the side of Mark that yes, that is the only purpose. What else do we do in school? That is what the school is for. But I think over the last 10 years, that has kind of mellowed into this. So, and where it situates itself is in the thought that this this idea that what an architect will do at 35. I think it's a little bit conceited to think that in the 5 years that this person will be in our company, we are going to do that magic. So I think there is where I would differ slightly from Mark. So yes, we are always striving. It's not to say that we are not. We are kind of pulling our punches because no, that's not our job. We don't kind of say that. Let's not make this mistake of making this person more creative. By all means, if this person becomes better at at their work, becomes more dynamic in terms of delivery, becomes more expressive of ideas. All of those are good things, but uh, the education of the architect and the development of the architectural mind to a point where they can do meaningful practice, and by meaningful I am using the word because I don't have any other better word. All practice is meaningful as long as it gets you the peace. So that's not what I mean. What I mean is that something which leaves an impression, something which makes you stand up and look at it, something which says that yes, uh, why not copy this? Let me be very, very honest. So, I mean, uh, the best kind of design would be one which immediately tells you, oh, this is wonderful, let's have more of it. And maybe I can do this myself somewhere else. So, that kind of design, we hope will happen uh, through this person when this person starts the practice at 30 or 32 or 35 or whatever. But that is not really going to be only because of what this person did in these 5 years at architecture school. A lot of it could be already shaped by where this person came from when came to architecture school. That's the early childhood, the school days, the very young days. A lot of design, I think, and that's certainly true for me. Uh, a lot of the design I do is actually something which I am carrying somewhere at the back of my mind from when I was maybe 5 or 6 or something like that. So there are things like that. I used to study in a very very tiny school which used to be on the second floor of the house. We never had a park at that time, so our park was the rooftop of that, and then all the houses were close together. It was like Dilli Che kind of environment. So the parapet walls of the adjoining houses, they all touched each other, and then the neighbors on the houses on either side were very kind to let this school people break those walls. And so on the roof we had a park which was like 4 or 5 houses across. Now that is an image which so much is stuck in my mind, that one of the first things I think of in design is how are we going to use the roof. So when a student comes and tells me that they didn't make a roof plan, I mean, it sends a shiver down my spine. But roof is also a place. Come on, why didn't you think of this? So I think, and that never, I mean, it has nothing to do with those years in college. We did nothing in which we did any great roof design. Okay. And this empathy for our great Le Corbusier was because of his wonderful roofs, not because of anything else. So those great, the Brise Soleil and this and that and all those things, I mean, they didn't leave me cold, but I mean, they didn't really warm me up as the way I found those things on the roof. And this is the man after my heart. So I think the shaping of the practicing architect is really not just dependent upon the 5 years of what we actually do as the accessible tasks in the course. So in these 5 years, there is a lot of interaction with really beautiful minds. And I'm not saying just the teachers, I'm saying each of the students themselves is a beautiful mind. And I think even if at this time, certainly, I mean, it's kind of all, coming out. The teachers are really getting exposed. Okay. So we are having problems because of this online. Students are having a problem because of this online. But students are communicating with each other so much at this time. Okay. So what is their support system? Their real support system is themselves. And they want to join the college not because they are hankering for their teachers or for the library or for the building and the lovely things in it. They just want the college to start because they want to be with their friends. So the learning that will actually make the difference can come from many different places. So it can even come without going to architecture school. Let's be honest that there are so many people we come across in our lives, and sometimes they are our clients who will tell us, when I was out just after school, I also thought I'll become an architect, but unfortunately, I got in the top 100 in IIT, and look where I am. You get to hear that from your clients, and they talk such wonderful things. He said, oh my God, if he had been an architect, he would have done wonders. So where did this person learn all this? This person learned all this from the environment. What this person didn't learn in a kind of, you can say, a sequestered space, or rather a cloistered space, which is called a college, though we try not to make the college a cloistered space. But yes, there are rules to be followed, there are things to be done, there are things set in a certain order, and there are things to be done, and then you have to be assessed. So the need for doing that is because there are so many things. We find that, yes, at this time, when your ability to learn new things is possibly the most intense, or how do you call it, strong, okay? As they say, at 21, you are at the peak of your intelligence, and after that, it's all downhill. Okay. So by the time you are 21, if we can at least put inside you all these important nuts and bolts, then what gets created out of that will take care of itself as you go.
This is true, of course, that learning happens, and those learnings happen anywhere and at all ages of life, and which are never assessed, of course. And but within the system, we have a few questions. I mean, I'm now just looking at time. In the process, this is Srijani Hazra. In the process of design assessment across the semester, is there a scope of self-evaluation so that students learn from each other rather than our grades telling them how well they have performed? Professor Mathur, I think you did touch upon this, and I think Professor Vasavra, in my conversation with him also, he said that there is this peer-to-peer assessment that takes place. Am I correct in recalling this? And Amrita, of course, I know you have this in your plans also. You didn't mention it today, I don't think, but would any of you like to sort of, I mean, I think the answer to that is yes, it does happen. But any particular instance in which, a way in which peer-to-peer has worked especially well, or?
It is, for me, it's a standing kind of let's say order. It's part of the menu. So we like to do it, if not more, at least once in the semester, and including this last year, 2020. That would have been the fourth year actually, when we actually did this kind of thing somewhere towards the 60% stage of the semester, say around the 9th or the 10th week. So the way we work on this is, I take the housing studio. So the way we work on this is that we let students do work individually on whatever we are doing. We don't kind of throw open the project as in, okay, this is the big project you're going to design and let's now start designing it. And we don't do like that. We generally like to not reveal the big project till maybe the 6th or the 8th week. We do lots of smaller exercises in which we get students to a point where they can really cogitate a lot about little things and get to discuss amongst them. I mean, it's something which is of a level, you can say, which they don't get overawed by. I mean, the discussion is about things which they already know. So at that level, we give them some small things to worry about, and the discussion ranges from, why are we even doing this? What does he expect? I mean, how much magic can be worked in this? This is the only way to do it. And then suddenly you'll find, and it's always some girls who, do it. They will come up with some brilliantly different things, and then everybody will say, oh my God, it has to be a girl again. But it's like that. So something of that nature happens. Okay? Then what we do, I mean, progressively we go making that problem a little more complicated, little more nuanced, adding some extra thing to it, till we reach a point where we said that, okay, in all of this, now so many of you have put in your work. These are the various things which are coming across. Then we say that, okay, now out of all this, so we kind of say that it's like a swayamvar, So out of all this, you choose who you'd like to partner with, and you have to tell your reasons. Okay, the project is not yet revealed. So on the basis of all that, we get them to look at other people's work, share their ideas, talk to them, figure out that sometimes it is that we find really astoundingly, divergent combinations. Somebody just wants to partner with somebody who we thought they'd never get along. but somewhere they find a connect and they join up. So that is really on the basis of whatever we say that, okay, so you produce something like this, you produce something like this, do you see a connection? How do you evaluate that? So it's not really that we say, okay, these are the things on the board and we want everyone, please give your likes, and whoever gets most likes is going to be the winner. It's not really a contest of that nature, but it is something in which we get the students to size up their possible partners. So it's not something like, they are compelled to size up all the others in their class, but certainly they will be sizing up maybe 6 or 7, those who they think are likely to be their good partners. And what I have to tell you about this is that at the end of it, the level of, you can say, accomplishment which that pair achieves after having chosen their partners, at the end of it, you are really hard put to kind of, do that separation, or you can say the differentiation between, as Rajiv was saying about between the A's and B's. So at the end of it, all of them seem to be A candidates. All the pairs become A candidates. So I thought that after all, that was our intent. So it was not as if, we need to find a winner out of all of them, but what we need is that all of them should be of a higher standard. So when they are looking at each other, which they do all the time because the crits are open, the juries are open, all reviews are open, external juries are also open, except now when we just ask them to be watching, they can't participate. But otherwise, in the live juries, of course, students can also butt in. All that is permissible. So when they do that, that involvement itself is so good. That involvement itself is so kind of it's very fortifying. It's very therapeutic. Like boost is the success of my energy. That boost is they get when they get the freedom to talk openly about somebody else's work. I think that's very important.
Yeah. And we see things in others' works that we cannot actually see in our own. Separation, of course. Right. Thank you. Vibhuti has asked a question. Has your assessment ever been contested by the students? Is that encouraged? How is it resolved? I think this is referring to, I think, Professor Mathur and Professor Mishra's, collaborative process of assessment, and, you come to an agreed plan, you agree upon the plan, you agree upon the assessment also. So, yeah, this is, I think, from there. Professor Mishra, would you like to take that first?
Yes, that is what I said. If you involve the students in making the design brief, they get involved and they come to know exactly what a particular group of students or what a particular student has not been able to achieve. He has been able to achieve a certain target of goals, but he has not been able to find time to achieve other targets. So I think we never had a situation where a student is contesting evaluation as long as he has been able to give his best for a given project. The only idea is that the student is left with an idea that next time I'm not going to leave this part of it. Next time I'm going to make sure that I will cover it up. So contesting is where it involves that you gave this student more than me in spite of me doing this. I think that does not happen in our case because of this student evaluating each other along with the teacher, and the teacher asking students, do you think this is what could have been achieved but has not been achieved? And then they satisfies themselves about their evaluation. I think there is no hard feeling. The only feeling is that, oh, I missed out that. And therefore, they only look forward to achieving it next time when they approach another design project. I think, as I agree with Mathur sir, what is it that ultimately we want? Ultimately, we want them to give us a high standard of performance. We want them to give us a high degree of performance, irrespective of what they get at. So we are not contesting their form. We are not contesting their architectural statements. We are not contesting their, oh, you could have done this. I don't like this. You could have done that. We don't do that. Okay. Under the current circumstances, this was the best thing you could achieve. And you have done it through your processes that you followed. And I think that level of satisfaction is great, both for the teacher and the student. So I have never had a problem of in a studio project faced where a student has contested it. Student has been finding it quite satisfying because the process that we follow and the involvement we have, the continuous evaluation process helps. And then they are quite happy about it.
Right. How many would you say continuous evaluation, just roughly in a semester?
How many? I didn't get your
Evaluations.
question.
You said there's
We,
continuous
for a,
evaluations, so approximately, yeah. Just to put on.
yeah, we do 2 every month. Every 2 weeks we evaluate. So that we
Okay.
come to know where has the progress been made by the student with the help of a teacher. And if there is a situation where a student would have done better had he known this, gets cleared with the faculty member.
So I
So
guess
this is what
there's a
you would have.
difference also. Sorry, there's also a difference, I guess, between evaluation and assessment. So that's being evaluated, of course, but not necessarily assessed continuously. Is that right?
Not Yes. I meant evaluation. Assessment is
No,
something else.
you said evaluation, and I was actually mixing up the two.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. I don't know. Ekta saying noblesse oblige. Not sure how that fits in here, but noblesse oblige and self-worth, as Mark says. Okay. Right. I actually have so many questions, but we're going to take another hour. I think if we have to go through them, we need another webinar. I think in which I'm really, really interested in taking all these qualitative aspects and figuring, because it's a thing for all of us. I teach first year design. And, Deepika yesterday, also part of the first year design team. Mark has been teaching first year. It's how do you really, put a number when it comes to it? All of these qualitative, processes and systems of evaluation. Where does the 8 become a 7.5 or a 7.5 differentiated from a 6 or some, like how really, it's not just 0, 5 and 10. It's never so clear. I think Professor Vasavra has just left, but in a phone conversation with him, he was saying he marks them high. I don't know, he has 3 sort of steps, and there's a sort of less adequate and sort of competent adequate and then sort of high. But really, how does even one say, okay, there is a list and you can say, okay, if you've achieved 80% of this list, then you get the high, or 60%. I would really like to get many more nuts and bolts into place, or, rubrics as we like to call them, and marking criteria as into the discussion. But I really think that's going to be for another time, unless there is something which you can say. I know it's not a quick answer to any of these, and Hanji, please, Mr. Mishra, Professor Mishra.
You see, as long as the student has enjoyed doing this design project along with the teacher, we have succeeded, is what we think. See, learning is an enjoyable process. It is just that you should feel it. If you have not felt it, it's a mistake both on the part of the teacher as well as the student. I think the job of us, as a teacher, is to make a student enjoy designing as a process, and he come out with his wonderful solutions. And as long as the student has enjoyed it, actually it doesn't matter what assessment is all about. I think he loved it, he went through it, he experienced it, and his architectural statement, whatever it is the order of the day. I would do that. So we as teacher enjoyed guiding them. They as students enjoyed working with us, and we both nourished the design project. It's more like that. I would look at it that way. Yeah. So I'm not against assessment. I'm not against assessment, but assessment is letting a student know that he cannot get away with. No, he can't take it lightly. He cannot be very casual about doing a project. And he better be careful. Otherwise, if he takes it casually, it is insulting all those who are taking it very seriously. And it brings in some kind of discipline of thought process. I would put assessment that way. Yeah. I would do it that way.
Amrita, would you like to add to? Yeah.
I think I would completely agree with what Professor Mishra has just said. And I think we should refrain from actually getting it into some sort of, process where we know how exactly, like, why do we need to know the nuts and bolts in that sense? What is it going to achieve, right? If this, what difference does it make if a student has got 7.5 versus 8? Where is the difference? The student, have they actually been able to learn and kind of absorb and come up with certain, I would even say certain positions for themselves in their future trajectories, whatever those positions are. So as long as that's happening, yes, students are concerned about marks, but I generally like to start my studios by saying you have 50% and you have 75% attendance. Now tell me what you're going to do with it. How are you going to work with this? How are you going to work with the thing that you have in front of you and, make it relevant for yourself? So
that's a good one.
Yeah, so that's where I come from in this.
Professor Mathur, sorry, you had your...
I just wanted to say where the marks make a difference is because that's the overall ecosystem which does it. So
sure. Exactly.
So the marks will make a difference because they all add up to being the difference between an 8.3 and an 8.2. And where does that make a difference is when they want to do something else which is based on these results. So
exactly, they're all coming and saying my GPA has gone below something, and that means something in some world, of course.
So yes, there is a new policy in place which hopefully number one, let me say it acknowledges this great fallacy, and it wants to stop it. It wants to work against it. We all have to do a lot of work to get out of this. It is not easy, because it's so kind of deeply ingrained into us, this business of the high mark and low mark. I don't know how we are going to actually do it, but till then, this will make a difference. That 7.5 or 8 will make a difference. So I would
agree with you.
I always say when in doubt, go for 8.
Same. I was going to go there. When in doubt, go for the higher.
Mark tells us to do the same thing. Yeah.
So it's not something that that's what I meant, 7.5 and 8, because we as people who are grading actually tend to, a lot of the times I've seen, especially people who've just joined the academics, in some sense tend to hold that as a thing. This is what I have, this is my tool, and I think we should stop using it as such, as a tool. It's not a tool for us. It's something for the student. So again, that mindset has to completely change. We are not giving them marks. This is where they are at. Should I give? Is not something. Up to me.
And yet we do give. Unfortunately,
No, I
that is
always say they
also the
get.
thing on us. We have to give the
I also
marks.
say that they get.
No, madam,
They
they earn
get.
it.
But
They earn it.
they earn, they get what they already have. They have received what they already have. What is their due? All of that, all good. Yeah. But yeah, we
I
are,
hate,
there
I
is,
hate,
yeah,
I
Mark.
hate grading. I hate
Oh,
grading. I always get others to grade as far as I can.
Yeah, that's why that's how Mark gets to be a favorite jury member. You know, it's
Oh, I'm very.
when
I
you think
give
the
exception.
class is in trouble, you get Mark.
Favorite for whom? The students or the teachers?
Oh, what both?
both.
Both sides.
Right. All right. I think, well, I don't know, closing remarks, comments from anyone. We are ending with a laugh, so I think that's a good way to close. And
Just
sorry, Professor. No, I think.
I said
Acha.
just as well.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Professor Mathur. Thank you, Professor Vasavra. Thank you, Professor Mishra. Thank you, Professor Madan. Amrita, thank you, Professor Mark Warner. And we've had a wonderful chat. And but another one on assessments. I really want to know. I'm not letting this go. I want to know that how that switch over from qualitative to quantitative, how each of you do it. That's all. That's, not that there is something that you have to prove or, support or, defend, but just to know at some point it'll be good.
Yeah.
I think that will
All
lead
right.
to a lot of arguments right here because Manoj will say 100%.
Oh, we had that argument in that dissertation jury already. Yes. All right.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you all. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.